Welcome to AstroChat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monica Anna. We are three professional astrologers living in three separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another AstroChat. Today, it is the three of us here. Yay! Myself, Kimberly Williams, Monica Anna, and Anne Sundell. And so we're looking at the full moon happening in December. To be specific, we're looking at December 15th. Here in Central Time Zone of the US, it'll be at 3:01 in the morning. Across the pond in England, it'll be at 9:01, and in Finland, 11:01. And as always, feel free to convert that to your time zone so you can follow along. We're going to have the full moon at 23 degrees of Gemini, and we're going to be focusing a lot on the full moon itself and a little bit on what's happening in the 2 weeks between that full moon and the next new moon in Capricorn on the 30th. Rather than break out all the different things that are happening, I think we're just going to focus on what we see. And as I said, most of it will be about the full moon, so we'll break out those aspects later on. But first, Anne, why don't you start us off by talking about the Sabian symbol?
Thank you. I'm going to read the Sabian symbol for 24 degrees of Gemini. And it's children skating over a frozen village pond. We can think about how we can use our circumstances right now, and maybe how we can use things that might seem like they're inhibiting us some way and rise above, like Gemini can do, or the opposite sign, Sagittarius, can also do in different ways to find a new approach and how we can proceed.
We were having a lot of discussion during our pre-chat before we started recording about this particular Sabian symbol and all the different analogies we were drawing from this idea of ice. For me, being out on the ice, it tends to distort a lot of what we're seeing. And I think as we dive into the aspects, especially involving Neptune in a bit, I'll talk more about that. Sometimes things feel distorted. We don't know what we have to work with just yet. And we may need to do some waiting before we're able to really act on those things.
I have to say, I'm really not surprised, but I always amazed how the Sabian symbol really reflects the moon feel, or what the full moon on the new moon brings in terms of aspects, how they really link to one another. I don't think we had one new moon or one full moon when we were catching up and talking about it, where the Sabian symbol did not make sense at all. It was like, I can't see that in the transit. We looked at this one and that makes sense with this planet and this connection. It absolutely tells the story from two angles. And I think, again, it says children playing on ice. It's not adults, it's not the village, it's actually children. You have that the idea of the innocence and fun. It's the children, they're innocent, they might not understand fully what the dangers of playing on ice is. You have fun, you have winter, you have this picture in your head of just kids playing hockey or just ice skating. And yet there is this kind of hidden depth underneath that frozen pond, like you say, Kimberly, something distorted in the depth as well. So there's this kind of feeling of danger, of something underneath that maybe we're not fully aware. So it will be interesting to unpack that and look at how the actual transits are reflecting that.
Yeah.
We are having a full moon in Gemini. I will probably go a bit dark with that. So normally Gemini, it's an air sign. It's a sign of the twin. You have this idea of the heavenly twin and earthly twin, the idea of we have always two sides to every story, two sides of the coin, two sides to us, the earthly needs and the spiritual, emotional needs. And I was just thinking about how this full moon comes at the time of the deepest and darkest time in Northern Hemisphere, where we're descending into the darkness. The days are still getting shorter until our winter solstice, when the sun will win, and we'll start having the days getting longer until during the spring equinox they will even out, and then they'll be actually longer than the night. But we're actually still in that descent. So we talked about the new moon in Sagittarius, which just happened, how this is the time of hope and vision and holding on to something. And again, having that idea of any mythological or religious character descending into the darkness, they always had that hope and that light that they believe they can come through on the other end. And then we have this Gemini, again, the full moon in Gemini coming just before that rebirth of the sun and just before the new moon in Capricorn. And for me, just speaks to that we're at the peak of the cycle before we will descend even further until that new moon in Capricorn. We have those two choices. We can choose to hold on to meaning, to hold on to hope, to hold on to light, to hold on to things that keep us going when we go through a darkness, or we can give up and let the darkness overtake us. And I'm being very melodramatic, I'm fully aware of that. But again, going back to what I was saying last time about that never-ending story, it's still in my head during the season, about that swamp of sorrow or sadness, how it envelops you. If you give up to it, you will get just swamped by it, sucked into it. And I feel like this full moon in Gemini as well, it just reminds us that there are two options, that there are always two ways. And even if you don't see a way out of the situation, there's always two ways to approach the situation. So there might be not two ways to get out of it, but there might be two ways to approach it. One with that hope and positivity is, okay, it might be a shitty situation, what can I learn from it? Or it's a shitty situation, let me just sit and give up. There's one person that used to say, when things happen, you can ask yourself two questions. Why is this happening to me? Very passive approach. Or why is this happening for me? More active approach. What is it that I can do in the situation, even if it is difficult? And we can't dismiss, no, not everything you can wish away or manifest away. If your loved one just had an accident, going through a cancer treatment, it's not something that we can just wish away. Sometimes we have to go through that period. And I think this is what both Sagittarius and Gemini, Sagittarius new moon, Gemini full moon teaches us about this period. We have to go through it to descend into that darkness, to learn about it, and then reborn with the light at the winter solstice. That's why the winter solstice is so important to so many religions and so many people around the world, because it's that rebirth of hope and refresher of our lives and of the paths and plans and setting up our favorite New Year's resolutions. So that's my spin on the new full moon in Gemini. Would you like to bring some more positivity?
I like it. I don't think it's too dark. I like it. I think it's a good reminder that we are still in the period of descent. We have not completed the descent yet. It's a good reminder. For me, the annual full moon in Gemini is all about ideas, and definitely the ideas that give me hope and optimism. There's this balancing whenever the moon is in an air sign. There's always the balancing what's going on with the head and the heart in some way. But with this particular full moon, the sun is opposite in that optimistic, forward thinking, pulling me outside of my self sign of Sagittarius. And so this for me is like, I always think about, this is the time of year I move into my new planner. I'm one of those planner geeks. And what is exciting about moving into a planner is before I start the very Capricornian task of scheduling everything out and doing my KPIs and all of that. Before I do that, there's that moment of, it's a pretty planner. It's new. It's fresh. Let's put the stickers in. Let's do the affirmations. Let me think about my word for the year. I'm one of those, I have a word every year that I try to incorporate and move. And so there's something about what are the things, the ideas that inspire me, that fill my heart up with optimism and hope and make me feel more positive, that I can get through the coming year and I can do it before I get into the challenge of how will I do that. And to me, that sort of is a very practical symbol of how I tend to respond with this lunation every year.
Like I said, when we talked before we started this recording, I showed my picture here. I have a Sag behind me. That's like the Sag philosophy in life. So
if no one recognized that, that's a Moomin's story. And what is he called in English? Snufkin, I think.
yeah, I think so. So he's this guy that just plays the music and he comes and goes and he searches for summer everywhere and so on. And it might seem right now when it's dark and very icy cold sometimes in Finland that we need to look a bit at that picture too, because it's gonna approach soon again. But still, with Gemini Sag, I feel that we have, like Monika said, we have always opportunities to look at things from different views. We are giving the possibility to see maybe many views that might be hard to even know which way should I go, which road should I take now, which solution is right. And then it might also be good to remember the water sign. How does it make me feel? Which decision, if I have a lot of things in my head going on and I'm not really sure about what is right, then water is the deeper end of that, and it's emotions. And remember to feel in, tune into those emotions too.
I like that. Before we dive into looking at the chart and talking about the transits, I'm just curious, something you said, Anne, what time does it get dark there now?
About 4 o'clock.
4 in the afternoon. And
Yeah.
Monika, what about for you?
Same.
The same.
We have a dusk around 3:30. By 4 o'clock, it's pretty dark.
Wow. Here it's probably not until about 6 o'clock that it's dark. It gets dusk a little before that. But okay, I was just curious because as you were saying that, I'm thinking to myself, oh, wow, that has a whole different meaning for when you're living over there where it's darker even longer than here.
I am just checking my app, and we have sunrise at 8:07 and sunset at 15:53. So 3:53 p.m. if you're not 24-hour clock user. So before 4 o'clock, the sun already sets, and then we have this kind of dusk,
Wow.
and by 4:30, it's pretty dark. Where I live now, actually, I live on a street that doesn't have a street lights. Over the water, and then a little bit of a greenery there. So when it gets dark, it gets pretty dark.
So for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, it's literally a physical descent as well as a mental or psychological one. Those in the southern half, obviously different. All right, if you guys are ready, I'll pull up the chart and we can just take a quick peek at what we're going to talk about before we dive in. So hopefully this is sharing on your screen the way it is on mine. We are in a Mercury retrograde, so fingers crossed that works. What we're dealing with is the Moon at 23 Gemini, opposite the Sun, of course, at 23 Sagittarius. And we're going to be talking about not just that full moon, but the fact that it is bringing in the T-square between Jupiter and also in Gemini and Saturn in Pisces, which will perfect later this month. We're going to talk about the fact that it's making a very tight T-square to Neptune in Pisces. There's also the Sun making a quincunx to Uranus, the Sun in Sag to Uranus in Taurus. In addition to looking at all that's happening with the full moon, I think we're going to take some time to talk about that Mercury, which has been retrograde and it'll station direct on the same day as the full moon on the 15th. And when it does, it is making a grand trine to the retrograde Mars in Leo, the North Node in Aries, and it also makes a lovely sextile to the South Node. And since the two of y'all weren't talking about those retrogrades last time, when we piecemealed it together, maybe we can get a little more insight about your thoughts on that as well. And I don't know that we're going to really unpack it, but just worth mentioning is that lovely Neptune, currently transiting through Aquarius, is going to make an exact trine to Jupiter, air to air, and that'll be on December 20th. So if some of the stuff we dive into starts to feel heavy, overwhelming, or dark, know that there's the 20th of December where we have some light and the two benefics making a trine to hopefully bring us some levity to the situation.
So they're meeting just before the winter solstice.
Literally on the heels of it.
Wow.
All
That's
right.
pretty cool.
Who wants to dive in first? Let's talk about the sun and the moon and all of the aspects happening there. I think those are sort of their own package, as it were. And then we can, after we untangle that, we can move into the Mercury Mars stuff. The three of us speechless at once? That's unheard of. I'll start with something that you brought up, Monica, which is that the sun is quincunx Uranus. So the sun in Sag, quincunx Uranus in Taurus. And I like it because Uranus tends to shake us out of our ruts, out of our routines, shakes us away from things that no longer serve us. Often it is the great awakener. And what I have found is throughout the entire journey since 2018 of Uranus and Taurus, every time it makes an intense aspect, there's that moment of waking me up to what I need to see, waking me up to the bigger picture. And how can you get more of a bigger picture than with it making that quincunx to a sun in Sagittarius? It's like we literally need to stop having the blinders, I think, and see the larger picture, not just what am I doing in January, but what am I doing next year, the next 20 years? What am I doing with my life? What's the big screen kind of vision look like?
It's all the questions I really don't want to answer. And I was thinking, when you're saying so gentle about the Uranus waking you up, when someone wants to wake me up, especially on Saturday or Sunday, when you really want to have a nice lay-in and just sleep until midday, and someone wakes you up, you want to punch them in the face. You don't want to go, oh, thanks for waking me up. No, it's just like, what the
No.
hell are you doing? Give me a duvet. I want to cover myself. Go away. I don't want to see it. It's still middle of the night. I know it's 10 o'clock in the morning, but I still want to sleep. So this is the challenge with Uranus, isn't it? It's having that nice, you're in the middle of sleep in like nice lovely cozy bed, and then someone comes in and literally with a megaphone or something, wake up, and you don't know what's happening. And I think with astrology or self-development or something, we try to take those things in a positive way. And we're talking about this full moon in Gemini. We're trying to say, okay, what is it happening for me? How can I implement that? How can I be awakened more to this situation or awaken more to that challenge or issue? But sometimes you really just want to punch Uranus in the face. And honestly, can I have one full moon or one moon when you're not waking me up, when you're just letting me sleep? There is something to be said for ignorance is bliss. We said that so many times recently as well. With full moon is the energy of the moon just hyped out to the nth degree. And then you have Uranus energy, which is that electric energy of that lightning bolt, again, just coming and adding to it. So you just always have that explosive cocktail, however you want to approach that. Sometimes literally, sometimes just metaphorically, that kind of things blowing up. It might be fuse that blows up. I've noticed it's really funny. But there's this standing lamp in my house, and to be fair, pretty much every bulb in my house, if there are some aspects with Uranus, the bulb will start either flickering or actually will blow and getting the fuse out. So it's just a running joke, I think, now between me and Uranus. Which one will it be? No, which room, which bulb? I think it's that energy of the full moon that sometimes we just genuinely struggle with, because it is this peak of the cycle. It's this energy that it's either if it's pent up, it needs to release, and then you have this extra wave of Uranus just riding with it. So those full moons, those new moons for me are always a bit more intense. So I think you both always bring that up, and I think that's always very sound advice to just look after yourself a bit more in that, because it's with Uranus and with that energy, it's very easy to rush into something and just forget about looking after yourself.
And this full moon feels really big with the aspect it's making. It's expanding its energy, like it's going around with being close to Jupiter too. It feels like there's so much here, and Jupiter being the opposite sign of its rulership and things like that. So it's a lot of ideas, a lot of possibilities, maybe too much of them, maybe too much of those Uranian ideas too. And that might feel also a bit anxious if there is so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels There is a lot of anxiety in this chart, isn't it? Is this kind of feeling that runs underneath your skin when you just want to rush into your car for shopping, or you're running out of the shop and forgot something. It's just that little bit of anxiety that we sometimes feel, and just feels like it's just inherent in this chart. And for me, I'm just going to bring all that soup, all that stew now, because for me, that Uranus then links with that fiery trine that we have. We have the Mars, Mercury, and North Node in fiery signs, just speaking to one another. And on top of that, we have that Sabian symbol that Anna was saying. So it's that feeling of that rush, like, let's do something. Like, for me, ice, actually, it's very Uranian as well, because it's that kind of crackling, it's that light. You can see the rainbow in the ice very often, in the crystals of ice. So for me, that just links to Uranus very often. And it's that joy of rushing onto the ice. Let's get the ice skates, let's have fun. And yet there is this inherent, just slow down, just stop, just think, because that rush can actually put you in a situation where you might not want to go. Mercury is in a fire sign, but it's stationary. Mars is in a fire sign, but it's retrograde. So it's that fire, I want to do it. And Uranus is talking to me and pushing me. But is it the right time? We were talking earlier about the whole children skating on a village pond. And I remember as a child, when I was actually a child, skating on the village pond. We literally had a pond behind our houses, and there was also a river. It's the idea of when you saw the first ice on that pond, you wanted to grab your ice skates and go for it. And it was with time that you were actually learning to listen to ice, to listen how it creaks, to listen to the water underneath, and actually recognizing that this ice, it doesn't matter, it's -10, this ice is not formed yet. It still needs extra 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 nights to really form that stable foundation for you to go onto it. So the most, surprisingly, actually, most of the accidents that we had, it was actually not during the winter. It was actually the first time the ice forms and people want to run into it, not realizing that actually you need to give it a time. You can have all the fire on the ice, you can have all that fun on the ice after it formed. And earlier on, sorry, I'm just going to finish that thought, because earlier on we were also talking about ice road trackers. If you've never seen, you can probably see like little YouTube video. It's those huge, massive trucks that carry cargo over Alaskan or Canadian rivers and waters and lakes, frozen obviously, that freeze 6 times of the month, sorry, of the year. 6 months of the year they're frozen or something. And again, it's that if those trucks go on those ice roads too early, they will sink. And the idea of the hurry up and stop, Kimberly always says that with the Mercury, hurry up or wait. Again, when I was listening to the ice road trackers, they were saying that you can't go too slow on the ice road because you will lose the traction, you'll lose the momentum. You can't go too quick because that creates the vibration and the wave in the ice. And again, the ice can crack and you can drown. So it's that moment of being very mindful of what's underneath, of what's under your feet, what depths are under your feet, and yet being able to recognize that it's also time to have fun and to be playful. So it's this kind of 2 sides to Gemini. I mean, everything just links so beautifully. The full moon in Gemini, the current transits, and that Sabian symbol, we need to bring our fun even in the times of darkness. You need to have a giggle, probably especially in the type of darkness. I tend to bring my dark humor very often, actually, when it's really tough and difficult. But also you need to be aware of that underlying depth under the ice, that the ice is not as stable as it might look. So that's my take on the soup.
And let's not forget that North Node is in Aries. Like you were saying, it's all fire. It's a grand trine of fire. And with that North Node in Aries, the nodes are changing next month. So it's like the tail end of the transit. And so I feel like that just pushes even more of, I want to move. I want to do it now. Hurry up. But then, like we were talking about earlier, it's hurry up and wait. Hurry up and wait. Aries says, let's go, let's do. I need to start that next phase of my life journey that I'm here to do. Mars is in Leo saying, let's get creative, let's make it happen, throw more logs on that bonfire. Oh, but it's retrograde, so we might have to do some internal work around our creativity or something about our own confidence or something inside first before we can do that. And then with Mercury stationing, I just get that sense that we're ready to run out there on the ice. But if we don't know what's happening with the ice, what's underneath the ice, if we're rushing too quickly, we may be having a great time. The Sabian symbol was all these kids playing on the ice. It wasn't about the danger of the ice, and yet the three of us all instantly went there about you can have fun, and sometimes being clueless is fun, but we need to also pay attention. And I get the sense that with this particular setup, there's a really strong weight factor. Moving feels good. It feels right to jump in and to take movement. But everyone I know who's currently starting large things in their life up, they're hitting that stop and go thing. They got an offer for a new job that was supposed to start in December, but oops, now it's not till February. Or they're starting something new, but we're going to have to revisit it in March and see if it will have sustainability. Excuse me. In other words, what we start now doesn't have long-term traction. It's like being on the ice. It's great to be on the ice, but once the spring comes and the ice melts, it's gone. It doesn't have staying power the way like a Saturn energy. I think if we're starting things that are a one-time venture or are playful, because with so much Sagittarian and Jupiter energy involved in all of these aspects, I feel like this is a great time to experiment and play and not necessarily commit. I can go out on the ice for a day, but I don't want to make a commitment that I'm going to be out there every day for the next 6 months because it may be gone by then.
Absolutely. I think about also almost every day in the newspaper here you read about somebody that walked through the ice. Maybe because you're used to things. You're used to this time of the year. It's time for me to go on the ice. And I think that it's very important with this moon and with these transits to take the temperature all the time right now before we are doing things. Because with the retrograde Mars, it's also a lot about the initiation of things. What do I start up now? And it's retrograde Mars. Is it clever to start this? And why is my motive? What's my motive behind starting something? Because the speed might not be as I want to, or it might not be the right time yet. If we can wait with something a bit, let it make the plans, use all the ideas we have right now and every input of Jupiter, retrograde, Mercury, or anything that comes to mind, Uranus ideas, and then let it sink in before we are doing the next step. Because with Mars, it can be a lot about the temptation of acting. Also, maybe a reaction that it's maybe good to ask yourself, is that necessary to do right now? Can I wait with that one? But it might be one of the temptation that Mars is, or the lessons, or that comes with retrograde Mars.
I agree. I agree. I think it's really well said. I think with the Gemini full moon, we sometimes forget it is a time of choices as well. And it feels with that Mercury that rules that Gemini that it's currently stationing to go direct. Have you considered all your options, or are you rushing quickly into the one that is just in front of you? And it also feels, again, with that hurry up and wait, love that saying, Kimberly, hurry up and wait, that the options that you see in front of you now might not necessarily be here, or they might change a little bit when the Mercury will leave the shadow period, or when the Mars will then go out, when the Mars will actually turn direct itself. So it just feels like there are choices in front of us at this full moon, but it's not necessarily, it's time to get excited, but not necessarily, like Kimberly says, time to get committed.
Yeah. And let's not forget that before the Mars goes direct, its retrograde is going to take it back into Cancer, the sign of its fall. We currently have Mercury staying in detriment, even though it's going direct until January 1st or 2nd is when it finally leaves that post shadow. But the next year in January is when the retrograding Mars will go back into Cancer. And so I feel like right now we might be excited about what we're committing to or what we're choosing to do or the things we're starting. But come January is when we may have some regrets because that's may be when it's difficult to sustain the action, the energy, the resources, the momentum. That could also be saying to us that what we have as our resources now may not be. Remember, we started off talking about Uranus making aspects to that sun. It's easy to look at the big Sagittarius picture and overcommit. I find when the sun is in Sag, it's so easy for me to, I want to see the big scope of things and I want to do it all. And now we're going to have lovely Uranus, who to me feels a lot like Pele. When is that volcano going to erupt? In fact, when Uranus went into uh, Taurus this go round back in 2018 is when we had the unexpected eruptions out in Hawaii here. So like it literally to me feels like the wake up energy that, as Monika said, is not pleasant. It's not always easy. So in the sign of Taurus, our resources, what we think we need to survive, maybe we don't need that to survive, but there's going to be some changes. Or what we didn't think we wanted in terms of fiscal, financial sustainability, maybe those are things we're going to take on. We may have more expenses. It's shifting, and until everything stops shifting and settles, we don't really know what we're going to have to work with. So it just feels a good time for play, a bad time for making long-term decisions.
I like that. Good time for play, good time for long-term decision.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we can't dream, isn't it? Going back to, we're still in Sagittarius season. Full moon in Gemini is ultimately culmination of that Sagittarian vision. And again, talking about we have choices how to go after that vision. And I always say, for me, Sagittarius season is that preparation before I can make them plans in Capricorn. This is the time when I think and dream about, in that depth of the night, of what is it that I want to put on my vision board. I'm not necessarily creating vision board yet. That's my usually Capricorn season time when I'm pinning things into vision board, when I'm actually strategically placing them on the vision board in special, order, when I'm actually using that Capricornian Saturn energy to create structure for my dreams. But the dreams coming in Sagittarius, they dream coming during the month before winter solstice, when it's the darkest, when you dream about being on that beautiful beach, or dreaming about having this afternoon with the girls and having a cocktails in a nice summer garden somewhere. Those are this is the time of the dream, and I feel like this full moon's highlighting that as well. Don't act on it yet. Don't pin it on the vision board. Don't plan for it. It's like, Kimberly, I love what you said about the planner, because that's so true. The planner, for me, again, the planner starts with Capricorn. That's when I plan. That's when I put dates. That's when I divide my year into quarters and so on. But you get the planner, you get excited in Sagittarius season, you look at those pretty things and you dream about what this planner will help you sustain over the next few months. So this is very much the time to dream and use that Uranian energy to think about something differently, to have that kind of insight. Oh, I can do something differently, or I can approach this differently. This is the wake up from Uranus as well, how sometimes it gives us a new road, a new perspective, or suddenly there is no doors around you, all the doors are closed, and here is the Uranus with a wrecking ball, basically knocking the whole wall bloody down. Do you know what I mean? And say, hey, do you really need the doors? Just walk over the rubble. The energy for me, right? And I think this lovely fire trine, it helps fuel that Sagittarian fire of the season, but it speaks to the internal quest more than actually physical step-by-step action that will come with Sagittarius, with Capricorn. And I love that the next lunation we'll have, it's day before the New Year's Eve. It will be a new moon in Capricorn on the 30th of December. And I love that actually it will probably feel like that new year came a little bit earlier. I think last year felt like the new year didn't start until like mid-January. I think this year celebration, I will feel like the celebration will happen maybe a couple days before the 1st of January.
And Neptune is also involved because it's closing, the North Node is closing up with Neptune. So there we have also dreams or illusions or visions or time when it's maybe not the best to set anything in stone, but to see where we're heading.
Yeah.
And it's squaring the sun and the moon pretty tight. So you got this T-square with it, and that just takes me back to that Sabian symbol of I can't see what's under the ice. I may be having fun right now in my life, skating around with everyone else, but there's that tension, that anxiety, because there's something below that I don't yet see fully. But I have images, right? This is, I think, a great time to pay attention to our literal dreams that we have in the evening, our messages that we're receiving, the things that we talk about with friends that suddenly inspire us. Where is inspiration? You know, thinking about that Neptune and Pisces energy, where am I feeling inspired? And I never really thought about that, especially the illogical things that inspires me, but that doesn't, I don't have room for that in my house or in my job or in my, maybe we do. Going back to that, it's time to shake things up a bit. Maybe there's some element of what I need to feel inspired to incorporate my dreams into my life that is still out here. I'm still not looking at it. I'm not paying attention to it, or I'm not seeing it yet. And it needs that little bit of time to kind of form. You may have everything in place in life if you're one of the lucky ones, and that's wonderful, but a cake without icing is boring. What is the icing we want to put on all of that stuff? So this could be a good time for that. And it's also making a square to that Saturn, a wide orb square, but Saturn's an early Pisces, right? And that brings in the fact that Saturn and Jupiter will be making an exact square later this month on the 24th on Christmas Eve. What do you guys make of all that?
It's interesting, mythologically speaking, right? We have two kings, a father and a son, coming together the day before, or sorry, 3 days after the king is born, the sun king is born, like at the winter solstice. So it's a lot of mythological symbolism around that. It just feels like it. They're taking us back. So this is the square that happened in August. So the first square happened in August. And this is the first kind of opening square after their conjunction in 2020. So we know what the conjunction brought. It brought a lot of restrictions and a lot of, it's the Jupiter and Saturn's the expansion and contraction, right? So in 2020 we had a lot of contraction, and this is like the first square that is talking about actually what happened. Can we review that? Now we have enough distance. The first square usually brings us enough distance from the new moon, from the conjunction of the planet, or from the new moon, to actually have enough distance to think about it without that emotional involvement. Sorry. Is that feeling, can we reconcile of what happened in 2020 in our lives, how they changed, how the restrictions help us maybe expand in other places? There's a lot of restrictions and contraction that happened that squashed people and people's lives, literally and metaphorically. And also some of those restrictions actually came incredible boom in other places. It expanded our family life. We're talking about a whole wave of COVID children because people were at home, and suddenly 9 months later in 2020 we had boom with a lot of children. It brought families together because we had to be under one roof. So potentially our relationship expanded because we started seeing people actually on a daily basis, not just at 8 o'clock at night over dinner when they came back absolutely shattered. So I think the first square is forcing us to reconcile and really look at what happened in 2020 and how do we learn from that. The first opening square is the crisis in action, isn't it? It's the moment where we have enough of distance from that conjunction to not be emotionally involved, but actually review and reconcile. But also we know we have a way to go before the full moon, before the opposition. So at this point, what action do we take from 2020 not to waste that conjunction opportunity? For me, it's very much whether we're looking at the moon cycle or any planetary cycle. Conjunction is when we plant the seed. The first quarter is that reconciliation, saying, okay, I am going for that blossoming, but have I actually done stuff? It's like the moment where, have I taken enough action? If not, I only have a limited time now before the fullness of this cycle to push and really take the steps necessary to utilize that energy. Before then it will start waning.
Totally agree with that one.
I want to say not everyone at once, guy.
I think for me, I've been watching it since that August time period. I would say August, September, because they perfected in August, but the orb was pretty tight, right? So what was going on? What was the big Saturnian challenge that we had in August or September? Whether it was something wonderful that just created challenge in our life, or whether it was something really hard, it's like we're revisiting the next stage of that, the next step of that journey. And what I really enjoy is how Saturn can make something feel really difficult and overwhelming or unable to move forward in some way. And then Jupiter softens the blow or brings something. We were talking about this earlier. It's like, how do I receive some assistance in the midst of my crisis? The Saturn, the fact that it's that first square, it feels like a crisis. It feels really hard. It feels impossible to move through. And then there's but here's the best case scenario of a worst case situation that they keep happening over and over. And now we're at a place where we're having the second time of the square happening because Jupiter's retrograde. And I think the fact that it's retrograde softens it a bit. There's this looking back at what happened? What decision did I have to make? What was going on about changing my perspective? Because I feel like with Jupiter in Gemini, again, a very difficult placement for it to be, right? It's in detriment here. How do I have to change my perspective? How do I have to change my thinking? How do I have to change how I use technology? What is it I need to do so that I can move forward? It's the Saturn is a temporary obstacle. It's not an indefinite one. I have to use that Jupiter in some way so that I can move past. And with it being retrograde, it's a good time to look back at what did I not see as that was my choice decision. I felt like I had to do it back in those months. But now where am I at? What's the next step to move forward? And then we'll finally see next year when they square it together in different signs, like how we're going to bring some resolution to that whole picture. It's almost stringing a necklace. We did one bead, now it's the next bead, and then next year we have that third and final one. So when it feels really difficult, I try to remind myself that I have the greater malefic is squaring the greater benefic. So I do have some benefic energy trying to mitigate some of the challenge, and it's really for my evolution and my own good. So trying to work with it rather than resist it.
And I feel that both those planets are about limits, about boundaries, about finding these, but still they're both immutable signs. So we need to be very flexible and try to look through a flexible lens with these two, which is maybe not so easy for Saturn always, but yeah.
There's so much mutability in this chart that it just feels like things are not set in stone, which is good. However, it's really hard to get anything up and running. It's hard, like I said earlier, it's hard to get traction. And so I think we just have to play with it while we can.
I love that you use the word traction, because again, we're going back to ice. It's really difficult to get that traction on ice. So you're absolutely right. And again, it just, this transit and this chart just plays so beautifully to that Sabian symbol. When you say it's difficult to have traction, I can imagine myself on the ice just doing.
And I feel like tagging on to what you were saying about this is all going back to when they had that great conjunction in 2020 in Aquarius. I feel like with this series of squares, these three squares, it's really breaking through what started during COVID. So for some people, COVID was a time of grief. For others, it was a time of introversion and hibernation and being at home. For others, it was a time of financial crisis, work changing, like whatever happened. I don't think there were many of us that got through 2020 unscathed in some way, shape, or form. Whether we believed in things or didn't believe in it, we were all affected. And these are two planets that are about society, right? And what happens with society and our place in society. So it's interesting to me that I'm talking to so many people who are finally breaking through what started for them in 2020 or 2021. It's like we've come to the other side, and now we have to not be living in that, repeating that day in and day out, but really thinking forward. For a lot of folks I know, there's this, they're flying for the first time, or there's these making changes in their life that are really about I'm moving forward and what comes next. And COVID is literally behind me. It's not something I'm still in as a trauma signature. And I like that. To me feels really good that it's forcing us to break through whatever has been and really think about how do I use it? What do I need to leave behind? And how am I going to now start changing my perspective so that I can move forward?
It feels very much there's a new path that's happening for people. I've spoken to a few people that changed their life direction, and some of them quite late in their life. So it's not 19-year-old or 20-year-old that are just changing the major at university. We're talking about someone who left a job that they've been to for 19 years to try completely new career. We're talking about a lady now in her 50s again that going back to school and college because she wants to completely change her career. And it just feels like you say that people thought of those restrictions, and very often what COVID brought during that time is reevaluation of your family and of your work life. So I think a lot of people reevaluated the work-life balance. Is my work still suitable and sustainable? Does it support my life? Loads of people moved to different locations when they had opportunity to do remote work, and loads of people who actually thought that their work is okay, suddenly that work evaporated because those jobs were no longer there. So a lot of people had to change their jobs or the environment that they worked in. And I thought that was the kind of immediate reaction to 2020. But I think with the square, now I see that people are making more conscious choices. Like square, like I said, square brings that enough space from the conjunction that choice is actually now more conscious. At the conjunction, it's everything is together, so you can't see what's yours, what's not yours. It's a lot of reaction and unconsciousness, where the square brings, you know what, I need to make that change, I need to make that effort. So it feels what happened with 2020 when people were forced to make decisions around their work, livelihood, where they lived, how they lived, who they live with, to now making those choices a bit more consciously and saying, you know what, I am going to take that path. It doesn't matter how old I am. I'm going to go for become a midwife or become psychotherapist or go to, I don't know, film industry, whatever it is. I'm going to a new path for myself, because I think the COVID taught me that life is short, that things can change really quickly. So why wouldn't I create that change for myself? And I think that's something that's emerging. I've seen that a lot with just people around me as well.
Yeah, it looks like we're getting close to our time. Any other burning thoughts that either of you want to share before we wrap up?
No burning thoughts.
Oh, how about doing some tips or tricks?
Maybe a few.
Got any ideas?
If it's safe for you to go ice skating, then go ice skating in the moonlight. But if it's not safe, take the temperature of the ice, of the timing. Don't hurt yourself. The Gemini moon, I think it's a gift of analyzing and a gift of seeing like so many views. And I think this moon will give you so many new ideas, maybe also new connections, to be open to what comes, and still think about your decisions. Why do I want to do this? Why do I don't need to do this action right now? Play around with that, like play around in this time.
Yeah. I think my tip is very similar as well. It's playful one. So at the new moon, I was talking about that kind of having a month of gratitude, but also now that if you are following with that gratitude and noticing those beautiful things, what are the other beautiful things that you want in your life? So I think the full moon in Gemini, again, it can be just playful. Gemini, gathering of data. Gemini loves data, right? It loves gathering things, because what Gemini will gather, the Sagittarius will put in and put the big picture. Gemini will gather all the pieces of the puzzle, when then Sagittarius would look at all the pieces but we need to start with something. And I think I would again encourage you to be playful. It's a Christmas, Hanukkah, the festive season is just around the corner. It's having that playful approach to what do I want to put on my vision board in 2-3 weeks when the sun will move to Capricorn? What plans do I want to set for New Year? Can I play with it? Can I flick through travel magazines or house and home and garden magazines or stylish magazines? Do I want to put like a different job on the vision board? Play with it, see them, gather some data, gather some pictures, some quotes, some trinkets that you want to put together, but just have fun with it. Don't think about it. Don't think how it all comes together. Play with it. Just one kind of story from my own experience. I remember one year I said to my husband that would be fun to put a vision board together. So let's just come and see. We're a couple. Some of the dreams that we have, we share, right? So let's put it together. And I remember at that Gemini stage, Sagittarius season, we were putting all our little quotes and little pictures together. And I was thinking, my pictures are so different to his pictures. And every time I had a sneak peek, I was, oh my God, I literally had this anxiety that we'll put our vision board together and we'll realize that our lives are so incompatible. Very Saturnian fears, right? That is just like the structure is not there. And I was like, no, just let it go. Just gather what you want to gather. Let him gather what he wants to gather, and then we'll come together. And when we finally started putting the vision board for us together, it was so beautifully because we complemented each other. My picture actually really spoke to the quote that he did, or the quote that I had, or little trinket that I had fitted really well with the picture that he put on. And I remember that because there was so much fear and anticipation that was rising there. It's like, you know what, let's just step back, let's just have fun. Yes, I'm stepping on a thin ice here. It might cost me my relationship. When we look at it, are we still compatible? But just lean into that hope and believe that actually the dreams that you share with someone can materialize and allow that. And again, that teaching of the season, allow that hope and that vision to come through.
Beautiful. I'm right there with both of y'all. I think it is a time to play and to experiment. I think for me, I'm going to be using this energy to go on Pinterest, or for those who don't like Pinterest, maybe grab some magazines, look for images that inspire you. Just what inspires me is my mantra right now. What inspires me without analyzing it, just gathering that up. And then once I have a bunch, I'm going to sit down and think about why does that inspire me? To come up with my list of if I have a bunch of beautiful pictures, is it because it's nature? Is it because it's a couple? What is it that is the thing I don't see, that Neptunian thing that is just maybe missing, that inspiration that I need in my life? And once I allow my intuition to pull all that together, then I can use my Gemini mind to figure out what it is. And that hopefully will help me when we get in 2 weeks to the next new moon, to think about how I want to incorporate some of these inspiring keywords into my life. But for now, I'm just going to start off by letting my moon look at pictures. And I like that. I don't know why, but I like that. Inspires me. That lifts me up. That makes me happy. It makes me feel very Sagittarian, joyous, and see what is unveiled in the course of doing that. All right. It'll be interesting to see how we all feel in 2 weeks' time on the other side of this. And as always, if you are following us on YouTube, please add some comments. Let us know what you're going to do with this lunation and how it's impacting you. If you listen to us on one of the podcast platforms, we so appreciate it if you can take a minute to rate and review us so that others may find their way to our chat. And we'll see everyone back here in 2 weeks' time when we do a chat on the upcoming new moon in Capricorn.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us in this week's AstroChat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. AstroChat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support AstroChat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.